Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 167 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast that is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me, as always, is my very lovely hostess, Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I didn't get to go on a vacation last week. Ooh, look at me. I'm Weer'd. I get to go on a vacation for a week and just issue all responsibilities.
You didn't have to do the podcast.
You know what? I tried. To do something for you.
I know.
Scheduling didn't work out, but I tried. Dang it.
I really that tickled me pink. I will say it live and on the air. Is I understand that it didn't work out, but I was very touched that you'd give it a good old college try. So thank you so much for that, Aaron.
All right. So the other thing. I started to say the other bit of good news, and this is good news, but it's not like you going on vacation was good news. Because you're my sound guy. You do these things for me. But the good news that happened last week is that my father was finally admitted to a Veterans Administration nursing home.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so we got him moved in on Wednesday, and so previous to this, he would call every afternoon, like at about 4:30, and talk to Mom for like 20 and 30 minutes. And, I mean, sometimes she needed to ask him questions, but for the most part, he was bored.
And let me just ask a quick question. I think I know the answer, given all the stories you've told me about your dad, but is your dad much of a phone call man?
No, he's not.
I thought so.
No, he's not. And, well, there were constant COVID scares and lockdowns at the rehab place, so I don't know if he ever really got to leave his room except to do exercise or whatever. But we got him moved in, and that day he didn't call. And okay, that was maybe a little unusual, but like when Mom would go to visit him, because she'd try and visit him once a week or so, and so on the days she would visit him, he wouldn't call because he'd already spoken to her. So, all right, he didn't call. And then the next day, he didn't call. And so it's like, well, I mean, okay, this is possibly good, but it's also kind of strange. And so I believe by Friday he called. And I don't know if it was just he was so busy doing things that he forgot to call, or he just didn't feel lonely. But for whatever reason, he's really enjoying it there. Mom says he sounds more like himself now as opposed to just depressed and waiting to die. And so, he's having fun and they're taking really good care of him, and he doesn't have to eat his meals in his room. They've got like a mess hall's not the right word, but kind of appropriate for a bunch of veterans. And, it's like he sounds like he's having fun at camp. Now, I don't know how long this is going to be, if he's eventually going to get tired of it or not, but at least right now, he's really enjoying it. And given that this is a man who loves to complain, the fact that he's having a blast right now says a lot about it. So that's really good.
It's also good news in the fact that, he needs to keep up with exercise and other things that he is not inclined to do to keep himself strong and keep himself from falling and hurting himself and all that. And so if he is having a good time there, and it is a place that he wants to be, but it's also filled with people that aren't going to take any of his crap and be like, no, you're going to get and do some exercise, and no, you're going to eat the right food instead of the wrong food, then this will have more than one beneficial effect.
Absolutely. And of course, the happier he is, the longer he's going to live, which is good for everyone. So, yeah, I honestly, my prediction before he got into this place was, yeah, if we can't get him into nursing home, he's going to be dead by Independence Day.
Yep.
And, well, he wasn't, fortunately. And now he's there and he's doing well, and hopefully he will respond to the treatment and thrive there. And I mean, he's 85, he will, well, everyone dies eventually. The point I'm making is that, it is inevitable and you can see it from the horizon, but hopefully he will have a good, a longer run.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now Mom and I are cleaning out his room, and oh my, I call him a hoarder, and I don't know if he really is a hoarder, or because I'm hearing that a lot of people from that age, from his generation, saved everything. I mean, we have found check registers from 1969. I think I've found every single pair of glasses he has worn. It's just, oh my God, why is this here? We're throwing stuff out. So, that's the next step in this, as we, sift through about 50 years worth of accumulated stuff. And then Mom wants to do her stuff so that when she dies, because she's like 82, that's one less thing for me to do. And so, oh God, we're going to be doing this for the next year. But yeah, that's my week. So, Mr. Vacation Man, come, Mr. Vacation Man, tell me about vacation.
Well, we went to Grand Isle on Lake Champlain. We were about 15 miles from Bernie Sanders' third house, and it was it's the long running camp. People, this is one of the things we talk about. We say, how do you tell people about this camp when to outsiders, and I'm not the only one who's thought of this, but essentially it is like Dirty Dancing without the dancing. and I'm Fred Dalton Thompson, and my daughter is Baby.
Okay.
Have you not seen Dirty Dancing, Aaron?
I have not.
You should continue not to see Dirty Dancing. I despise the movie. But essentially, like, imagine like a Boy Scouts camp, or probably a Girl Scout camp, except it's for the whole family. It's not a kid's summer camp where it is. Yeah, we stay in it's a platform. It's like a Bedouin style platform tent. So wooden floor, 10-foot ceiling in the middle, and there's furniture in there. So we're sleeping on like dorm beds, and there's a dresser and tables and things like that in the tents. And there's a dining hall, but because of COVID, we didn't use it. So they had like an event tent out in one of the fields, and we ate out there. Which was interesting because normally it was assigned seating, but there was no assigned seating, which my daughter, this was the first year that she was not underfoot the whole time. She met up with some friends. There was a few people that she had known from previous weeks, and then she met other people through them, and she got herself a little gang, and essentially the bugle would blow and she'd be like, "Bye, I'm going to go meet at so-and-so's tent." Bomb, gone. And then, we would see her at breakfast at a table just filled with kids doing Lord of the Flies stuff. And then mealtime would be over and gone. And next she'd come back and say, "Oh, I'm going to go swim at so-and-so's tent. Her parents said they'll watch us." Okay, gone into the lake. And so she swam every day. I didn't, this is the first time I think I've ever been there where I didn't swim. Might have been one year where it was really cold and nasty, and I just didn't. I think I went in the water like once and went, "Oh, it's cold. I'm not doing that again." But this is, I think, the first time where I did not put my swimsuit on the entire week, but she was in like every single day, including the day when it was raining sideways. She's like, "Now I don't have to bring a towel." Okay. So it was good. It was good to be back. I was reading Monster Hunter Bloodlines. I'm so far enjoying it very much. And
I'm holding out for the audio version, so no spoilers.
Oh, none giving. I'm only about halfway through, a little over halfway through. So no spoilers are going to be given. I am just saying I am enjoying it so far. Xander's given me a little bit of a harbinger towards the end, not anything specific, so I'm going to be surprised no matter what, but he says the ending is going to be interesting, so we'll leave it at that. But yeah, so but we got all the way up to the last day, and of course it was a shortened week to begin with, because I think they added an extra week. They took a day off of everybody's week so that there could be cleaning from the staff. And furthermore, we are having the work done on the house, and so there were workmen all over the house on the Saturday that we were planning on packing, and so we ended up. Oh, and the head unit in my car died, which also controlled the climate control. So when I was driving to Best Buy, who had installed the head unit, I realized, it's blowing hot air and it's 90 degrees outside. So that was a super enjoyable ride. But yeah, so we got that fixed. And so we ended up arriving a day late. And then on essentially the last full day of camp, the plan was we'd get up in the morning, have breakfast, pack everything up from the tent, and then drive home. One of the staffers come by and say, we're having a meeting. We recommend everybody come. And I'm like, okay. And we recommend you wear masks. I'm seeing where this is going. And it turned out a camper had tested positive, and they contacted the state of Vermont to let them know that a camper had tested positive. And the state of Vermont said everyone had to quarantine for 1 week. And they're just like, that leads us into the next week, which is our last week of camp. So they just said, we're shutting down. Camp's over. Everyone go home. And just like that, we were getting ready to go to lunch. We were going to go to lunch in like 5 minutes, and nope. They drove by with in a golf cart with boxed lunches in the back. Would you like some lunch? Yeah, I'll take some lunch. I'm starving. But we just packed up everything and just left immediately. And, there was talk about, quarantine and all that. My wife was a little bit like, well, what should we do? And we ended up just giving my daughter an instant test just to make sure, because she's actually at my parents' house right now. And we just didn't want to send a sick girl across state lines. But the bottom line is the shared facilities are a function tent, with open sides, and essentially restrooms that were originally outhouses back in the 1800s that have just since been plumbed. So everything's like open air and all that. We're just like, this is not close COVID contact. I am not concerned at all. I'm not any more concerned than any place else. You're more likely to catch it at the grocery store than you are at camp. So we have moved on. Of course, everyone's feeling fine. And so it was an abrupt end, but that was mine. And then I've just been doing laundry, so much laundry, all the laundry from camp. And then some friends were actually, they were having some remodeling work done in their house. And we're like, hey, we're going to be gone for a week. Take ours. And so they had stayed here, which was awesome. I liked the fact that there was somebody house sitting my place. But at the same time, it meant that there was no towels in the entire house when we got home. And, and now we're having a hurricane. It's terrible, Aaron. Maybe if I was lucky, I could get a kite up in this thing. People that are supposedly a hurricane touchdown, a tornado touchdown in Western Mass. And actually, I confirmed it on the news. You hear a lot about tornadoes in Massachusetts, but it's rare that they're ever confirmed. It usually goes through and say, no, it's just a severe microburst. But this is in fact was a legit tornado. But I haven't seen much. Seen a little bit of rain come sundown and a little bit of wind, I guess. Yeah, no. I was not concerned when I heard that we were going to get hit by a hurricane. Hurricanes in New England are a literal joke. Hurricanes in Florida, no joke. Hurricanes in New England, total joke.
So you saw that I posted a link to something called a wall tent. Is that what you were in?
More or less, yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
The one you've got. Yeah, let's see if they got. Oh yeah, very much. Yeah, very much. With including there's a picture on the Wikipedia page for wall tents, with a like a homesteader type guy where he's using dead dead poles of trees, and that is it's exactly what they use. They use local trees for the framing. So yeah, that is absolutely what we stay in, and it's on a wood platform. Looks like he's got a stone foundation. Good for him. Living high on the hog with that wall tent. All right. Well, shall we dive into the main topic?
Yeah, I suppose so. What is the main topic for the week?
Well, I've got two of them. One is good news. One is bad news. Which one would you like to hear first, Aaron?
Well, bad news, I guess.
Let's start with the bad news. So, President Biden, I have spoken a lot about how I don't think he's really going to do a whole lot as far as gun control goes. And I mean, technically speaking, this isn't super duper severe, but it's pretty severe. Biden has stopped approving permits on import of Russian-made ammo. I didn't know that there were permits to begin with, but essentially there is come September, Russian companies will no longer be able to import ammunition into the United States.
So here's my thing, and that'll show you how much in the loop I am. I could have sworn we banned such imports when the Russians invaded the Crimea back in, 2013? I think that was. I just assumed that we weren't importing stuff, and so the fact that he banned it is like, what, he banned it twice? It's double banned? I didn't realize until I read this that such a thing only lasts for a year unless you top it off.
Okay, so was there just a 1-year ban on the? I'm actually not even remembering this. I mean, I remember there were a whole lot of talk of sanctions against Russia when the Crimean invasion happened.
I don't know, Weird. I'm half-assing this just as much as you are.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is, because I read the linked article in the Reload. The very last paragraph, it says, once the sanctions go into effect, they will stay in place for up to a year. The administration can then renew them if Russia has not met several benchmarks under the biological weapons law. And why is that? Well, earlier on, they said that the reason the Biden administration says that it's going to be, it's not so much banning as in stopping the approval of Russian-made ammo and guns. It's because these are sanctions against the Russian government over its poisoning and imprisoning of political dissident Alexei Navalny, or however you say that name. So in other words, this is all, well, I mean, any chance Biden gets to screw gun owners, he'll take it, but it's political. It's all about, you did something we don't like, so we're going to ban your importation to hurt you. So,
yeah, but this is, I mean, it is good news that it will only last a year and will need to be renewed. So hopefully.
What makes you think it won't be renewed?
I honestly speaking, I mean, the bottom line is it wasn't renewed with the Crimea thing, and it's not like Russia's still not playing games over there. So who knows? But the big problem with this is that we are in the middle of an ammo shortage still. And so this is only going to make the shortage worse. And furthermore, if you are one of these ammo snobs on the, oh no, I don't shoot steel case ammo, Sasha only gets the best American made brass ammo. Well, guess what? The people that do shoot Tula ammo or Wolf or Red Army or all the other Russian-made ammo, they are going to have to turn, if they want to shoot, they're going to have to turn to the American-made and the non-Russian-made stuff, and that will further add shortages to the more premium stuff, and will drive up prices. So this is.
Well, I mean, you're not wrong. I don't have a solution immediately, but a solution does present itself.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, for example, Glock. Glock is an Austrian company, and that is where they run the company.
Mm-hmm.
But they have a manufacturing plant in Smyrna, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And that's domestic. Because it's
there's
manufactured
Kalashnikov
here
USA.
in America.
You're totally right.
And so, well, I know Kalashnikov makes guns, But what I'm getting at is it would make a lot of sense if someone had the foresight and the money to just make an ammo plant here in the U.S. for the Russian calibers and maybe, what's that really popular oddball one for the CZ?
Are you talking about 7.62 by 25?
Maybe. I don't remember. Look, I'm just here to be a pretty face, okay? I don't know all this ammo stuff, this gun stuff. But anyway, seems to me that someone who did that would stand to make a whole lot of money, because not only would they avoid all the importation tariff and this sort of thing, but they would, if done right, get the goodwill of a particular community because, hey, they're bringing in jobs. So, yeah, that's what I would do if I was Russian and had money.
I mean, honestly speaking, I can't speak for it because it's a huge capital risk. But I think if I was an ammo company, I would be thinking about expanding production facilities anyway, because all of these gun sales, and again, it's been pretty well documented that a lot of them are new shooters. This is going to, the demand stream is not going to go away. And there was always the people that were originally making the joke about walking into the pawn shop after the election and picking up all the new guns. Because the people that are buying them now would stop, would sell them off because they didn't feel they needed them anymore.
I haven't seen that happen.
Yeah, no, that was a fool. I could have easily predicted that was absolutely not going to happen, and it appears it has not happened. These people have all been. Or the ammo the guns are still staying in those hands, and these people are new gun owners, and we welcome them into the fold. And so, yeah, I think expanding production lines would be just a good idea in general. And then also, oh my God, I love the cheap Russian ammo, specifically my 9mm Makarov. Oh, I love shooting that round so much, and I will be sad if I cannot get more resupply of that as well.
I mean, aren't Americans the ones basically responsible for shooting all of the surplus 54R ammo? Mosins are cheap. Ammo's cheap. Yeehaw! Why can't we get more? You shot all ammo. Yeah. What?
We stopped making it, and then you shot it all. It's like,
well, then you get busy making more, Ivan.
Yeah, it's like passenger pigeons. Supposedly the flocks of them, when they would migrate, would blot out the sun for hours, and then what happens? We ate them all. All right. Well, now that we are chuckling, let us talk about the good news. And I've actually got this. This is also from the Reload, and North Carolina passes pistol purchase permit repeal. Interestingly enough, a couple weeks ago, I was talking to somebody about essentially racist origins of gun control and all that, and I was making note of the Missouri. I think it was a firearms purchase permit. But they had a purchase permit system as well, and of course North Carolina, and the Missouri one's been gone for a little while, and I was like, when did the North Carolina one get repealed? I was like, it didn't get repealed? Seriously? And actually Sean Sorrentino's been talking to me about the big push that they were having this year going through, and he actually said he didn't have a whole lot of faith that it was going to go through, and it still is not law at the time of our recording. Hopefully by the time this airs, the bill will be either signed into law or be allowed to go into law without the governor's signature. But it still could technically be vetoed. But North Carolina has sent to the governor's desk a bill that would repeal their Jim Crow era pistol purchase permit.
Do we know if it passed with a veto-proof majority?
According to this story, it it did not. I don't see the actual numbers. Yeah, I'm not seeing the numbers off the top of my head. I guess I could look it up, but it that, and given the fact that Sean was saying that it probably wasn't going to go through, means that there were enough people that were like, yeah, no, we want Jim Crow laws.
Yeah, I think it's going to be vetoed because I did a quick check, and the governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper, is a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
And again, shout out to our left-leaning gun-owning friends. We love you. But unfortunately, the stereotype, because it's true more often than not, is that the Democrat Party is the party of gun control. And I think he's going to veto it. Now, whether or not they'll override him remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to be proven wrong. I would love for this to go into law.
Yep.
But
still, though, I've got to say, as we saw with, things like with National Park carry, every year someone would present a National Park carry bill, and every year they would present it, and first it was just that crank bill that was being presented, and then it would get a few more supporters till now it's legal. I would argue same thing about concealed carry reciprocity and the Hearing Protection Act, except for when we got the majority, we never sent them. So,
yeah.
But either way, this is a good start. And all our lovely Second Amendment activists in North Carolina, you've got to push for this. I mean, I think the most damning fact about this bill is that essentially, for those that don't understand what I'm talking about and haven't looked up North Carolina law, if you've got a concealed carry permit, you have to show your carry permit when you're purchasing a firearm, and purchasing a handgun, and they will look at your permit, and then they will let you go through with the next check. I don't know if North Carolina had their own background check system, or if they've got they use the FBI. But either way, if you do not have a North Carolina concealed carry permit, you want to purchase a handgun, you need to go into your local law enforcement office, and you need to request a permit. It costs $5. You essentially fill out a 4473 form. The sheriff's office has 7 days to either issue you your permit or deny it to you. And this is not a permit like a carry permit where you have it and you show it to people and all that. No, you give it to the gun shop. The gun shop takes it and then gives you your gun. And so it's essentially a coupon. The big reason for this permit was at the time of the antebellum South in the Jim Crow time, $5 was the average weekly wage of a black freedman. And so the idea was that you would essentially price the undesirables out of the gun market entirely. And then furthermore, you have to apply for it in person at the police station. And, well, if you've studied your history books, you could understand why a freed black slave might be a little reluctant to waltz into the sheriff's office.
And I do believe there is something within the law that states that a sheriff can deny a pistol purchase permit for people of, quote, insufficient character, unquote. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the law, there's no definition of what that means. It's basically, hey, sheriff, use your best judgment. Gee, that can't be interpreted in a racist way at all. No.
I mean, it's the same with the Massachusetts May issue. If you look at any town that has a large minority population, go figure. Those are the towns where they jerk you around the most when it comes to getting your carry license. And so, yeah. And I mean, you don't hear, actually, it's usually done in a blanket system here in Massachusetts. You usually see more like the story that we talked about a few weeks ago with the man who had been caught in proximity to various drug deals and people who use drugs, but never actually got charged with anything, and they decided to deny him his permit. and he'd had a permit in the past, decided to deny his permit just because, you know what, he doesn't seem like he has a good character. And to which I say, maybe he doesn't, but then you should be sending some officers after him and putting him under surveillance, because unless you've convicted him on something, it just looks bad. It doesn't necessarily prove that it is bad under the eyes of the law.
Mm-hmm.
So either way, good job on North Carolina. Even if this doesn't go through, you guys did some awesome work to get that bill to the governor's desk. And if it gets vetoed, keep sending it back till it goes away, because this is a terrible law and it should never. It should be gone forever.
Speaking of gone forever, what's our update on David Chipman?
The update is there is no update. And actually, before I left from my vacation, I sat down with Stephen Gutowski of The Reload. Of course, we've got links to The Reload in the show notes, because honestly, if you're not reading The Reload, you're missing out. And I told him before we started recording, I said, just so you know, I'm going on vacation, like the next day. And so it's going to be a couple weeks before this shows up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to email you before we record, just to see if there's any updates, and literally emailed him and he said, yeah, there's no update. So there is no news on the David Chipman watch. It's kind of gone radio silent for the last week, 2 weeks actually. And so, but still, you've heard us talk about the weirdness that is his nomination. So I sat down with Stephen Gutowski and I wanted to see what he thought about my theories on why David Chipman was nominated. I am so pleased to welcome back to the Assorted Calibers podcast, Stephen Gutowski. He runs the Reload website and the Reload podcast. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm doing good. How are you? Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, I'm doing well, and I will, for the sake of listeners, and of course we'll be talking about this in the outside of the segment, part of the interview in the podcast. But I will say that this is going to be coming up like a few weeks after we have recorded this, so there will probably be some new developments in the David Chipman saga. But I really wanted to bring you on and say so. All your reporting on David Chipman, we've heard all this in the last interview, and furthermore, you have been reporting like crazy on the Reload, and there's stuff that even I haven't read yet because I'm talking to you in the past. And so, so all the trouble with the Chipman nomination for the head of the ATF, what do you think is going to happen? How do you think this is going to play out?
You know, it's hard to say exactly. Obviously, in DC, things can kind of turn on a dime, depending on what develops. But I think that his nomination, as the White House admitted Jen Psaki, the press secretary, admitted in a press conference recently, it was always an uphill battle for him, I think, because of his past as a paid gun control activist, and really his current as a paid gun control activist. He still works for Giffords. That's obviously something that's going to be a big hurdle when you're talking about the director of the ATF, the agency that's supposed to regulate the gun industry. Putting up an activist to fill that role is always going to be controversial, and was always going to be hard to get him through in a 50-50 Senate, where they're going to need, either support from the Republican Party, at least a few members, or they're going to have to get their entire caucus of Democrats to vote for him. Now, that's obviously not impossible. They've done that with a couple of candidates who've gotten through on strict party line votes, but it's obviously pretty difficult. And so then clearly after that, you had just negative stories that came out for Chipman, including, a major one that I broke corroborating the existence of an allegation that he had made racist remarks while he was a manager at the agency's Detroit office, and that clearly didn't help his chances. And so right now, it certainly seems difficult to imagine he's going to get to 50 votes. He had a tie vote in the Judiciary Committee after his hearing, but that was back in June, and no action has been taken since then. Technically, Schumer could call him to the floor. The majority leader in the Senate could call him to the floor for a vote anytime he wanted to, essentially. And he hasn't done that because presumably he doesn't have 50 votes to get him confirmed. So the last couple weeks here, as we're discussing this, have only been worse for him and his odds of being confirmed. So it seems unlikely at this point.
All right. So now here's the point where I put on my tinfoil hat. Longtime listeners of the show know that I like to occasionally muse about conspiracies that I think may or may not be happening within the gun control world. I've certainly got a little mini episode that Aaron had me published separately that I call the Bloomberg conspiracy, where I point out the fact that Bloomberg was always trying to diversify his name within the industry by creating groups like Moms Demand Action and The Trace, and then later March for Our Lives, where it was all distancing itself from the Mayors Against Illegal Guns, where he was the figurehead. Him and Tom Menino of Boston were front and center as the leaders of that group. And, well, Bloomberg has never done well in popularity contests, and certainly his final presidential run was no I mean, demonstrated that perfectly. And so I was always wondering, well, wouldn't Bloomberg want to diversify into something that couldn't be immediately tied to him? And of course, I noted that, honestly speaking, you don't have to be a multi-billionaire to essentially discharge the huge amount of debt that a group like the Brady Campaign or Americans for Responsible Solutions were amassing, since the Everytown seemed to be grabbing all the big number donors. So why wouldn't Bloomberg grab those? And I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I think all kind of ties together. The fact that they all changed to mononyms at about the same time. They all went from being groups that were really kind of fighting to be the head of the pack to suddenly doing these massive joint operations together. So that's one of my conspiracy theories. I've got nothing to concrete put that up, and I even think a crack reporter like you, Stephen, probably couldn't get any hard sources on that, just because of how everything's probably laid out in that.
Just on that point, real quick, you can track a lot of what Michael Bloomberg does in the political space if you follow like the major groups that he uses to donate money to other groups, right? Mm-hmm. Like The Trace, right? You mentioned, that's not entirely funded by Everytown, but it was started with a grant from Everytown, right? And mm-hmm. received support from them. And Everytown is obviously funded by one of Michael Bloomberg's political groups in a very significant way. And really, I mean, I don't think it's in a stretch to say that Michael Bloomberg has single-handedly revived the gun control movement with his really large pocketbook, right? I don't think it's controversial to say that. I don't know how much money he's given specifically to groups like March for Our Lives or Giffords or Brady off the top of my head. I wouldn't be surprised if they did receive funding from the groups that Bloomberg funds. There's a lot of in political giving, especially with someone who has the means the size of Bloomberg's. There tend to be a lot of groups that they distribute money to, and then those groups distribute money to other groups, and so you have to trace back through these different middlemen political groups to get to the source of funding, going all the way to Bloomberg or somebody like the Kochs or George Soros or people of those kinds of means. That's usually how they interact with the political system, is that they'll have like a fund that they have set up or a nonprofit that they have set up to fund other nonprofits and funds, and then those nonprofits and funds also give out grants to other groups. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was I haven't looked into it in the last while here, so I can't make any definitive statements, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was money from Bloomberg's groups that ended up in the other gun control organizations that you just talked about.
But what you have looked into is David Chipman and David Chipman's past. And so one of my first big factors that there's a lot of things about the David Chipman nomination that don't add up. There's some stuff that does add up. I mean, having a gun control lobbyist that was working for Mark Kelly, who is a current senator, having him be put at the head of ATF certainly is a big boon for the anti-gun wing of the Democrat Party. And so I could see where there would be favor curried by having him up there. So it isn't completely out in left field, but at the same time, boy, it's a risky nomination just in the fact that he is a lobbyist. And then furthermore, you've got all of these records that they are sealed, but don't you think that the White House would be able to get their hands on those records pretty easily?
Well, I think certainly it's impossible to separate the politics from David Chipman's nomination. Like he was clearly nominated because of his connection to the gun control groups. And President Biden is obviously not just, this isn't just something that is in his platform, right? It's definitely an issue that he personally cares a lot about. And so it's one that, I don't know that this White House is willing to just go out on a bunch of limbs for the president's personal, whims, but I think this is an area where they're more willing to take a political hit to try and get somebody confirmed to a position that they know will try to carry out their particular political agenda in this situation. Like, I think that's something that the president is willing to spend political capital on, even though they know, like you just outlined there, that the fight would be very difficult and they'd have to push harder than with any other nominee really to the position. But there's kind of a wild card aspect in the president himself being so engrossed by gun control advocacy. And so as far as like them knowing the skeletons in the closet, I mean they should, right? That's usually how nominations go. They'll investigate the background of the person put up, and they should know every potentially damaging thing that they've done and probably have some plan to deal with it. That doesn't mean they always do. They don't always catch things perfectly. People in DC are human too, so that they're not perfect at their jobs either. And so, I don't have a good explanation, obviously, as to how they prepared him or what they did for the background research on him, but I don't think it's certainly not outside of normal political operations for them to do a thorough background check on a candidate like this.
Yeah. And I mean, I've got to imagine that at least somebody from the White House probably sat down and spoke with Chipman, in confidence. And I'm sure very, very pointed questions were asked. And it seems very, very strange, especially in a campaign where, I mean, President Biden did take some political attacks on some of his gaffes that might have involved African Americans, and of course also BLM is such a big political factor right now, as well as race relations overall. I would be shocked that, I mean, there's incompetence and then there's just being comatose to not at least ask, hey, has anyone ever accused you of being racist? And of which case Chipman would be a fool himself not to say, well, off the record, and this is in confidence, but yeah, there was some HR stuff that went down. I was reprimanded for something or investigated or whatever the sealed files say. He would at least be able to give the gist of that. And furthermore, you've mentioned yourself in your podcast that Chipman and his representatives have not come out to give his side of the story. You've been attacked by the anti-gun groups fairly regularly now, and yet at no point is there, it's just attacking you, it's not defending him.
Right. Yeah, their response. I mean, in some ways, it's not surprising to just attack the reporter who's breaking the story that you don't like if you don't have a good response to that story. I mean, that's usually a pretty common strategy on both sides of the aisle when it comes to things like this. But generally, it indicates that you don't have a good response to it, and it is, they haven't brought out like sort of backup for him. They haven't brought out ATF agents to say, we still are on board, or brought out new ones. There have been new retired agents who came out on the record to oppose him over the last couple of weeks here, but there haven't been any to come out in support of him. And really all you've seen is just this, basically the same line that the gun control groups had given before he was nominated. They just repeated that and coupled it with accusations that, the stories were all made up without presenting any, evidence of that fact. So it's been an interesting thing to watch the reaction to. And I do think you can make some judgments. You obviously can't get a 100% confirmation by how somebody reacts to a story, but you can draw conclusions for your own opinions on how someone reacts to a story. But I think that one thing to keep in mind though is sometimes nominations fail. Like in every administration, this happens. Like they might do all the vetting, or they might go through their normal vetting process, and they don't catch something, or the person doesn't remember it, or they don't tell the truth about it. And then once they're under the bright lights, the actual confirmation process, they aren't able to stand up to what comes out. And that happens every administration with at least a few nominees. You saw that so far Biden has missed out on one of his nominees, mainly over her attacks on some of the senators who were supposed to be voting to confirm her. She's just sort of a very abrasive political figure who ran the Center for American Progress, Nina Turndon. She didn't get through her. And I mean, clearly you would assume that the White House knew about all of her past as well, especially since most of it were things that she did in public, public attacks on certain senators and so forth. But they took the risk of putting her up anyway. Sometimes you put up a nominee as a signal to an interest group, which absolutely could be the case with Chipman, right? I mean, he's literally paid by gun control groups. So putting him up is a signal to them that the president cares about their issue and appreciates their support and so forth, even if they don't really think he's ever going to get through. I don't know. It's you can't read. I don't have a source inside the White House to tell me exactly what their thinking was on Chipman, but there's a number of possibilities. But they haven't withdrawn him yet, so maybe they will by the time this podcast goes up. I don't know, but so they may still be under the impression that they can just wait things out and eventually apply enough pressure to the Democrats who haven't committed to supporting him yet and get them to flip, and then he'll get through. That's still a realistic possibility.
Yeah, or he might step down on his quote unquote own accord.
Sure.
Actually, do you know is he a family man? I haven't been able to find anything about his personal life outside of just what I've read about from the work that he's done.
Yeah, he has a wife who also worked at the ATF. Actually, she just recently resigned. That was actually something of an issue. She resigned in order to. She did an interview with I think it was the Trace, where she described how the confirmation process is unpleasant to go through, and being upset at some of the things that have come out and the stories that have come out, but she can't really talk about it because she didn't want to endanger his nomination. And then she stepped aside from her ATF position so that she wouldn't, if he gets confirmed, she wouldn't be working under him. And if he doesn't get confirmed, that, she wouldn't have to continue on with the stigma of a failed nomination. I don't, her words are out there. People can read them, but yeah, he has a wife. So yeah, he has a family, certainly.
Okay, so that leaves the option of the perennial spend more time with my family option, so that they don't get to be handed their walking papers by the very people that nominated them, and they don't have to get shot down by a vote. So,
yeah, that's usually what happens. People will withdraw themselves when it becomes clear that they're not going to get through. Although I can't remember. Yeah, everyone sort of just. Even if that's the technical term, like the technical thing that happens, everyone views that as like, obviously they were asked to, to remove themselves. So cause I recall when Trump tried to get an ATF director through and failed, even though Republicans had control of the Senate then. And that ended up feeling a couple weeks after, a while after his confirmation hearing, which I guess didn't go well from the perspective of the Republicans on the committee. And he wasn't going to get through, so the Trump administration decided to pull him and just stick with an acting director. That's the other thing about the ATF director position. It's like one of the reasons it doesn't get confirmed is because it's extremely controversial and polarizing issue, obviously. But the agency itself, but also like you can have acting directors. They're not as powerful as confirmed directors, but they're generally, when these things happen, like right now, there's already someone running the agency. There's an acting director today. Robinson's his name. And he, he's running the agency. It's not like the agency isn't operating. So that, I think that sort of removes some of the urgency that some of these senators might feel if that wasn't the case.
Well, all right. Well, final question, Stephen Gutowski, was Chipman submitted for the ATF director as a born to lose candidate?
I don't know. Some people have said that. Obviously, the White House says no, and they're today are still trying to get him confirmed. This is just, looking at it from the outside. Some people have obviously suggested that this was more of that it was more to try and please the gun control groups and less with the thought that he could really make it through a 50-50 Senate. But the way that they've pushed his nomination, it kind of feels like they really, like President Biden really does want him in there. So that's my personal view of it, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, well, it is certainly an interesting story. And of course, please go over to the Reload. If you're not already at the Reload, you're missing out, because Stephen Gutowski is writing some amazing stuff. And of course, also he's doing a wonderful podcast. You get amazing guests on. And so go check out those media. And thank you so much for coming on the Assorted Calibers podcast, Stephen Gutowski.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Wow, that one went seriously talking head for a while there, Weer'd.
We were having a lot of fun.
I'm glad someone was.
Well, I'm sorry.
You love it when I kick you in the crotch.
Yeah, it did go a little long. I hope our listeners didn't mind. I'm going to say I was very, very pleased. The first time I was talking to him about David Chipman, I'm just like, oh, I want to ask him the more conspiratorial type things on is this character is he born to lose? Was this done on purpose? But I'm like, yeah, but man, I read his stories. He's just so sober and level headed with his reporting. And I've actually got links in the show notes about the update on, there was another agent that stepped forward that has said that David Chipman accused him wrongfully of cheating on an exam, and this is an African American agent. And but yeah, just before we were talking, he was telling me about the story, but he was like, "It's got to be off the record because I still need to get a few confirming details before I can publish on it." And I said, "Don't worry about it, I'll sit on it." But it published the next day, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to put that in the show notes because it is a juicy one." But still, it was great to see super sober Stephen Gutowski of the Reload talking with Weird Beard, who has never been described as sober in his entire life. And he also was like, "Oh yeah, when you said conspiracy theory, I kind of expected you to go a little bit more nutty, but you know what? Those all do have some validity to them. And one must remember that for something to be a conspiracy, it just means people are conspiring. It does not necessarily mean aliens or lizard people. Please say, speaking of lizard people.
Huh?
Please introduce Paloma with the segue of speaking of lizard people as controlling social media.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal. Well, I am happy to welcome back to the Assorted Calibers podcast, Paloma Capanna, and she is an attorney that focuses on Second Amendment rights and other human rights. Well, we were talking about the human rights as they pertain to social media. How you doing, Paloma?
How are you doing, Weer'd? You know, I shouldn't laugh right at the top of the segment, because then everybody knows you and I have been chatting offline, and, you know, they are going to feel like they've sort of missed the joke. But I feel like who is on this broadcast with us is the HAL 9000. Does everybody get that reference? Y'all who are like at home listening to this now, are you looking confused? Or once upon a time, there was a computer in a short story, right? It's kind of how the HAL story goes. But where we are now is a point that government is so entangled with our everyday life and our smartphone that it does make you wonder if they shouldn't just put a chip right in your head. Mm-hmm. The prosecutions following the January 6th events at the U.S. Capitol is perhaps most interesting for revealing just how far the technology has gotten in favor of the government against the citizen. Pretty quickly after January 6th, and I do mean within days, within 3 or 4 days, prosecutors were already filing indictments, filing criminal complaints, having defendants arrested, and the content of their papers include wholesale downloads to the government from the big organizations, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Instagrams, the TikToks, and so forth, straight down the list. If we thought that metadata conceptually was what was going to keep us as individuals safe, that balloon needs to be popped with a pin right here, right now on Weer'd's podcast. Those days are gone. The government can find you in the metadata, and the algorithms are not only sufficiently powerful on their own, but the facial recognition software is now tied into DMV, our driver's licenses, our passports, and that's exactly what it says in the DOJ paperwork.
Yeah. So in your writing of your book, Events of January 6th, what did you uncover for as far as what was going on with social media?
Social media seems not only to be cooperating with the executive branch intelligence agencies, it also seems to be cooperating with Congress. So I just referenced how the DOJ was quickly filing charges, but at the same time, January 8, January 14, right in that time frame, members of Congress were sending off letters themselves to companies like AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon Communications, Apple, Facebook, Google, Parlay, Signal Media, Telegram, Messenger, Twitter, right? I mean, you name it. Members of Congress were sending off letters saying, we want you to give us the records as well. So we've reached a point that it's just such common knowledge that our own day-to-day personal interactions are up for grabs, that even members of Congress want records delivered to their individual offices concerning individuals associated with January 6th.
Oh, that's crazy. So I don't know. I mean, what do we do? That's the big question there.
You know, my really simple comment is take your smartphone and throw it in the river. But even as you and I are recording this podcast, I'm on my smartphone, right? The real challenge for us is there a way to devolve technology and our habits to something that is less aggressive and less instantaneous? Privacy law, as it developed after 1972, is still on the books and is still wonderful. So when I today go to the United States Post Office and I mail Weird Beard a copy of my book in a sealed envelope with sufficient postage and his correct address on the front of it, the United States government cannot open that envelope in the absence of a warrant. But at the same time, if I send him a text, it's just all over the place. So if we are going to be activists in this new environment of a Congress that is pushing domestic terrorism legislation, if we are going to be thinking up and over the horizon of where we might be going for the next several years with domestic terrorism legislation on the books, we are going to have to back up as activists, not because we're trying to skirt the law, not because we are trying to do something illegal, but because we are actually trying to exercise our rights without getting smeared and choked off.
And also a lot of this big data collection, it may not be a threat overtly, just because if they're listening to me, they're listening to you, they're listening to all of us. But then what happens if suddenly someone decides that they don't like you specifically?
Correct. And the tricky thing for me as an attorney is I'm always doing the drill down to try to get to the truth. And funnily enough, it's generally pretty simple. Generally, the explanation or the KISS principle tends to apply in some of the most complicated looking circumstances. But equally, in this sort of data grab, if you call it, period that we're also in a period of manipulation of imagery. So computers, the human imagination, programmers are taking it to a point where they can also start slicing and dicing and changing the imagery. And so we're also on the brink of completely losing control of where the truth is.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that's terrifying.
You know, it's not a very uplifting segment. There are folks who will say, "Oh," and every time we get Paloma on the show, right, and the whole audience just droops on the other end of this broadcast. But I think that what it should serve as is a real call to activists of all political persuasions to finally do what the Bill of Rights has been waiting for us to do with it since it was penned. And that is for us to realize it's not activist against activist. It is us trying to have space between us and the government, right? You and your dad, me and my neighbor next door in one direction. You know, we're going to disagree on politics probably all day long. Yep. Some of us want a bigger government, some want smaller, some want a bigger budget, some want less. Some of us looked at our, rebate check during the pandemic and we were like, we're going to have to pay this back, so I might as well keep it in the bank because my taxes are going up, right? Mm-hmm. But where we seem to have really lost track of things is we, the people, need to remember that when government is overreaching, it is overreaching against everybody. It is not just us. So if the ACLU is filing a lawsuit saying privacy is being breached through the use of metadata, how is it that we're not discussing the ACLU lawsuit at the NRA Annual Convention, right? And equally, when the ACLU is putting together one of their good primers on, what do you discuss with a police officer when you're stopped? Okay, why are we not looking at those? Yeah, there are some real common threads in there that concern freedom, and we need to really be sticking our fingers in between each other's ribs to say, what have we got in common? Because right now, the propensity of the federal government is an overreach that really pulls us back to about 1900 to 1905, a time right before World War I, when prosecutions were putting people into jail and convicting them for things as simple as throwing a handful of flyers off the top of a building in an effort to get the word out that the U.S. shouldn't join the war. Now, maybe that's not a popular political position, but think about that. A handful of flyers off the roof of a building and a person gets convicted. Well, today we call that free speech, and probably teenagers listening to this podcast will call that massively ineffective communication, right? Because now you put your podcast up, anybody the whole world over can listen to you. But we're reaching a point where government is going to have an overreach that harkens back to that day where someone like Beard, you yourself, you end up on a domestic terrorist list because you are talking about freedom, and we are going to shut you down. And that's the balance point that we're at right now. We have more tools at our disposal to get the word out, and a government that is more frightened than ever that we might actually be independent and free people.
Yeah, I mean that's powerful stuff to think about, and yeah, we've got to remember that it's not just the Second Amendment that we're standing up for. It's really all the amendments are all intertwined, and it's all about individual liberty and individual freedom and the ability to do with your life as you choose, and how you want to live and how you want to interact with your friends and your neighbors.
And we're always going to need government. I'm not a libertarian. I am not an anarchist. I do think that there is a very important and responsible role for government in balancing of things. I'm not a huge fan of chaos. I do like things fairly well organized. Not surprising that I'm a lawyer. But at the same time, I do think that human beings should have an opportunity to grow and mature and make some mistakes. And maybe we're going to say words that aren't eloquent. And next time we're going to do it a little bit better. So let's make sure there's some due process. Let's make sure there's an opportunity to be heard. I'm not a person who will ever burn an American flag. But the fact that that United States Supreme Court decision is still on the books and has stood the test of time is part of the reason I'm able to talk to you today and do this podcast, because there are plenty of people who do not want to hear what I'm saying.
No, that's very, very powerful and an eye-opener. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Paloma.
Oh, thank you so much, Weer'd, for having me. And it's just been a real delight to talk with you today. Hopefully we're inspiring some activists to get activated.
Yep. And of course you can check out Paloma's website on activism. It'll be in the show notes.
You know, I don't really know what to say about this. Well, I know what to say, but I can't say it on a PG-13 podcast. Wow. So I have a similar conundrum where I go, I really want to keep my blood pressure low and not get worked up and not yell and scream, but I also want to know what's going on in the world. And so my desire to stay calm and sane is at odds with my desire to be informed. And that's just the decision itself causes me anxiety. And this is the similar thing where I want privacy, but I also want the convenience of electronics. And I don't know what the choice is. Arg. Okay, if we're going to be living in a cyberpunk dystopia, and it looks like we're going to be, I at least want really cool cyber limbs, all right? I want to have the boutique cyber eyes where I can see in the dark, where I don't need glasses, and I've got infrared and ultraviolet, okay? I want smart guns that'll attach a sight directly to my optical lobe. I want to be able to jack into the net straight with my brain. I mean, if we're going to have all the suck, and we do, let's at least have the really awesome chrome, okay?
I want that. I want to be able to play NetHack while I'm driving and still keep my eyes on the road. Oh, would that be awesome?
Yeah, you have it jacked into your brain, but it's still gonna be the crappy little ASCII graphics because it's old school.
Oh, there's the question, because again, I find the ASCII graphics to be the most vivid because it's the theater of the mind. It's like listening to a radio show. What would it be like if it's jacking directly into your mind? I mean, the ASCII symbols are just a placeholder. It's like Cypher watching the Matrix code go by. It's just one of those like, yeah, no, I know what the code means. So blonde, brunette, redhead. So I don't know. Let's see. There's an interesting idea. What is NetHack in this dystopian cyberpunk world? And furthermore, to tie into another key point of Paloma's activism is, again, she is terribly afraid that we are going to expand the Department of Homeland Security to not only focus on foreign terrorist entities, but now domestic terror entities. And
you mean that hasn't already happened? Because I could have sworn it has.
I mean, it really it is happening, but not quite to the same level as the foreign ones still have it worse, but we can see them licking their chops and wanting to give it to us only harder, especially given all of the horrible actions that are going on in Afghanistan right now and all this talk about what the Taliban is doing and all of that. And meanwhile, we have press conferences where we talk about, we need to worry about white supremacists. And I also put another current event that I found really struck a nerve on me is I put in a link to the latest news story on the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot. I mean, I should put scare quotes around that, because the more information gets uncovered, the more it looks like who was plotting to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer? The FBI. It was
what?
Yeah. Yep.
Hang on. I'm trying to process this. Let me work my way through it. But the FBI, they are licensed law enforcement officers. They don't need to kidnap anyone. They get a warrant and they arrest that person. And, that's quote unquote kidnapping under due process. You don't need to commit the crime of kidnapping. You go through the channels and you legally arrest someone. Why does the FBI need to kidnap someone?
Because they didn't need to kidnap her at all. Instead, they needed to get other people to tag along with their paid informants who were plotting a kidnapping.
It was a sting operation.
It's an entrapment operation was what it was.
Oh, okay. So, like with the people at Ruby Ridge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Randy Weaver. That's it.
Yes, the Weavers.
Exactly that. Is a Hell's Angel got picked up for a drug charge, and they said, you know what, we'll let you go, but you have to take this shotgun, bring it up to Ruby Ridge, and ask Randy Weaver to cut 4 inches off the barrel, which would lower it to the legal length. So it was not the Hell's Angel shotgun. It was not his desire to cut it down to a shorter length. It's unknown whether Randy Weaver knew that it was knew that was against the law or not. But either way, it was all set up as entrapment so that they could have an excuse to make the raid. Similar to the discussion on whether the Waco Branch Davidians had converted some of their firearms to full auto. I don't think ever any evidence actually officially ruled whether or not that actually had happened or if it was just a anonymous source. So it seems more of this. And so either way, essentially they were targeting people that they had decided that they wanted to be domestic terrorists. And so they made them domestic terrorists. So yeah, any action that is getting rid of domestic terrorists needs to be fought against. It doesn't matter what you thought of the Weaver family on Ruby Ridge or the Branch Davidians or these guys that were tagging along with the FBI informants that were plotting to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. This can be used against Antifa. This can be used against BLM. This can be used against the Proud Boys. This can be used against Oath Keepers. This can be used against your book club. This could be used against our supporters on Patreon. Congratulations, you're domestic terrorists because you listen to our blooper reels. And they're right on that one. All right, let's just roughly shift gears here.
Just grinding off some burrs.
Speaking of the ACP blooper reel, at the start of the ACP blooper reel, I advise people to not operate heavy machinery. And honestly speaking, I mean, Matt from Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns always laughs because he drives a truck and sometimes he's driving a forklift and he's listening to the ACP blooper reels. And there's other people that are truckers and they are listening to the ACP blooper reel. Honestly speaking, the only one who almost gets killed all the time is Sean Sorrentino. There have been 2 near misses on the highway with the ACP blooper reel playing in the background of his dash cam. So Sean, stop it. Listen to it on your earphones when you're at work. Yeah, Xander is frequently listening to the ACP blooper reels on farm equipment, and because he's no stranger to farming, and he gives us his independent thought on how to create fertile ground for activism.
Welcome to Xander's Independent Thoughts with yours truly, Xander Opal. I had a couple things happen today that, perhaps ironically, planted the seed of an idea for this segment. First, I watched a movie that had just 2 anti-gun lines in it. The second is a conversation with a person at the grocery store checkout about farming. The person had a rather incomplete idea of what farming involved. An idealized situation that only happens after careful editing on a TV show that only showed the best side of carefully managed agriculture. When Weer'd reminded us of segments, the 2 things gelled together. I happen to recall a bit from the Bible, perhaps a parable. Aaron will likely be able to figure it out as I'm not much of a churchgoer. The story was about casting forth seed, some of which landed on rocky ground and did not sprout. Some landed in rough, bramble-choked ground and grew poorly, and some seed landed in fertile ground and flourished. I've also spent the last week prepping some 80 acres or so of ground and planting alfalfa for hay. So much tilling and smoothing of the ground and careful planting. Not just for getting a seed to grow well and outperform weeds, but also so that the harvest can go well at high speed. Getting messages out is like that. Stomping around in pseudo-military garb, open carrying with the scariest looking gun on your hip, or cradled in your arms, shouting, "Shall not be infringed, 11T, exclamation point 11T, certainly throws the message out there. But that's some pretty barren ground with that method, and there's nothing smooth about the harvest. Having the right thing to say at a moment in a conversation and letting go. One of the fields I worked on last week is having a waterway put in where no crops are to be grown, but a safe space for water to flow without ruining the underlying ground is important. Working with people, acknowledging the things everyone wants, which is a safer world, is the underlying ground. It takes time and effort to smooth the ground and pick out the rocks, tossing them aside. There are so many arguments that have to be carefully taken apart. It hurts sometimes too, the effort it takes and sometimes the small losses to deal with before the end process is reached. Someday I hope that every person who is an independent adult can choose to be armed as they wish. Even at that point, the freedom will have to be guarded, lest it be lost again, much like wild grass and weeds pushing in from a fence row. It takes so much time and effort to reverse years of loss like that, whether it be from literal lost ground or figurative lost ground. It starts with having the right tool at the right time, with a deft touch. We're not looking to make a barren wasteland. We're looking to make a green, verdant field of life and freedom. Believe me, there's a great satisfaction when you see progress on such a thing, and even greater satisfaction when you share it with your neighbor. So, to that's one reason why I like Weer'd's audio fisks. I'm terrible at arguing, especially in the moment, but having some practiced, prepared messages that I can gently put out there, much like the line from the movie, can give somebody else something to think about, and hopefully plant some seeds. Have fun, be safe, and I hope I gave you something to think about.
So thank you for the shout out, Xander. For the people who are curious, that would be the parable of the sower in Matthew 13.
Awesome. I knew you'd know it. I certainly didn't. Secular me did not know that parable. So, yeah, and also thank you for the shout out on the Weer'd audio fisks. That's exactly the plan for it. Originally, my thought was that anti-gunners would listen to the podcast and it would start a debate. but anti-gunners don't listen to our podcasts. I don't even know if the anti-gunners listen to the anti-gun podcasts. But
they don't, because that one anti-gun podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the name anymore, but it lasted for like 4 episodes.
Loaded
and
Conversations.
Yes, and like 90% of the subscribers were all gun people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, it literally said people who listen to this podcast also listen to Downrange Radio with Michael Bain and the Gun Blog Variety Cast. So, yeah, it definitely wasn't going through. Unfortunately, iTunes is now like app only, so I tried to look up the Brady campaign is now doing its own podcast, and I tried to look up to see if I could find similar informatics, and it told me to install the Apple Podcast software, and I told it no.
Surely you could get it on another podcast player.
I do listen to it on Google Podcasts, but it doesn't give the informatics on people who listen to this podcast also listen to. That was something that was specifically done on Apple iTunes.
Okay.
But either way, I appreciate when I realized that, they're not listening to it. I thought, well, what's the point of me doing this? Well, it's exactly what Xander said. It's inoculating people to the anti-gun ideas and maybe giving them a few ideas to think about when, to respond when they hear certain anti-gun talking points. But also, Xander's got a great line. I gotta say, sometimes my wife's got a little bit of a fiery temper. And so sometimes when something upsets her, she will just come talking to me when she is still hot-blooded, and she might have her voice will be raised and all that. And it's one of those like, whoa. And I will tell her, this isn't a good start for success. This is not the way you start this conversation if you want it to go the way you want. Better to win me over with kindness, to just ask me simple question rather than assuming the worst or what have you. So he's totally right on, the people that do the like tactical LARPing where they're wearing all the scary military hardware and they've got the crazy guns all strapped on and all that, and you're trying to one up the other gunnies, and the other gunnies are having a good time with that. But what about the people that might have issues with guns? Is that going to be convincing to them, or is it going to be worse off for us? Another thing is actually interesting enough. We were talking about at camp. We were talking about tattoos. Actually, my sister-in-law's got matching tattoos over the week, and we were talking about various tattoo ideas. And one of
matching with whom? She got matching tattoos with whom?
The two sisters got matching tattoos. They invited my wife to get it so all 3 sisters would have the same tattoo, but my wife did not want to break her no tattoo streak on that one. Also, okay. Since she's had brain surgery, she has frequent MRIs, and she realized, you need to be very careful about what ink they use, because some ink contains iron oxide, and you get that at MRI and it'll burn you.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
Oh yeah, no problem. But one of my relatives, who I will not necessarily out, but they are part of the queer community, and one tattoo idea that they had was a rainbow flag tattoo, and we pointed out that may not necessarily be the best idea, because especially if it's in a location that's showing all the time, because you are always representing. And what happens if you have a bad day? That's one reason why I only open carry at like open carry events, because I don't want to obviously Massachusetts limits me on that, but when I'm in Maine, when I'm in New Hampshire, I don't open carry, because what if I'm disagreeing with the cashier at the grocery store, and I'm just having a tough day and all that, and somebody sees this person with a gun and they're kind of losing their cool and they're getting a little hot under the collar, or somebody says something rude to me and I tell them off and all that while I'm carrying guns. Somebody's going to go, oh, look at these angry, violent gun owners. When, let's face it, we all have a bad day from time to time. And so when you are flying your Second Amendment flag, just like if you're flying your queer flag or your religious flag or whatever you want to relate yourself as, you are being an ambassador to that group. And so you got to make sure you lead with your best face if you want to win hearts and minds. Thanks to each and every one of our listeners, and a very special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. To become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast and bonus content, like the blooper reels. We talked about the blooper reels. If you haven't heard the blooper reels, you might want to hear the blooper reels. They're interesting. The ACP film track, you can sit down and watch movies with the cast of the ACP. And the ACP Bag Dump, which is our bonus episode that we have every month.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, not just iTunes, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
And you get more from me at my blog, that's weirdworld.com, and you can hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
One of these days, I'm going to have to there's apparently a thing called Linktree, which I'm currently investigating, and it's one site where you can link all of your social media stuff. So I should probably do that, so I can just, and you can find me there and pull out Linktree or whatever, instead of having to come up with this every single time. Blah.
AaronPalettisAwesome.com. And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music, because NateSpencerIsAwesome.com.
But do his farts smell like warm apple pie?
Sometimes. Other times they smell like sunshine and roses.
Well, he goes on vacation with family and gets a week off and has fun, and meanwhile I'm here all the time. I haven't had a vacation I don't think I'm gonna get a vacation all year. I'm going stir crazy. Send rum and chocolate and ammo. Our vacation hours are assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everybody.
Good night.